I never imagined I'd hear my disabled son scream like that. It sounds so raw, so desperate, that it shook me to my core. I was standing there, holding a bag of groceries, and for a split second, I couldn't move. His cry cut through the quiet, suburban afternoon like a knife. I thought my heart had stopped. It was the kind of scream that freezes your body, and before you even realize it, you're already running. I didn't think twice. I dashed across the yard, my breath shallow, my legs pumping, heart racing. What was happening? How could something so awful, so painful, happen here, in this peaceful, quiet neighborhood? But then I saw him, my little boy, lying crumpled on the lawn, his face streaked with tears. His cheeks were flushed, but not from the sun. No, it was the pain, the raw anguish that made them burn bright red. He's had this condition, a congenital issue, something that weakens his legs, makes them frail. He relies on a brace to help him walk, but on that day, the brace was twisted off to the side. His left foot, it was bent at an impossible angle. My throat tightened. The air seemed to leave me all at once. I knelt beside him, my hand trembling as I reached for his shoulder. "It's okay, buddy. It's going to be okay." I tried to convince myself it was just a sprain, a minor injury. But then, the moment he screamed again, that's when I saw it, his leg. It was bent in ways I never thought possible. This was no sprain. This was bad. Worse than I ever imagined. And there she was, standing behind me. Karen, the president of our HOA. Arms crossed, sneer plastered on her HVYLY made-up face, staring down at my son like he was an eyesore, something that tarnished her perfect neighborhood. She barely even glanced at me when I demanded to know what happened. Instead, she shrugged and said, "It's his own fault. He shouldn't be out here if he can't walk properly." There it was, her coldness, her disregard. If he can't handle a simple step, that's not my problem. My chest burned. Every ounce of training I'd received, everything I'd taught countless FBI recruits about staying calm in high-stress situations, none of it mattered right then. Nothing prepared me for the sight of my child, broken and hurt, with someone so careless standing right there. The instinct to lash out was there, but I forced myself to stay in control for his sake. I knelt down, gently pressing my palm against his shin, feeling for any swelling. He sobbed, and I could feel my VY sound blur with the kind of anger I hadn't felt in a long time. Neighbors were starting to notice. A man in a red cap, walking by, came closer, phone in hand. He asked if I needed an ambulance, and I almost screamed, "Call 911. Now," but still, Karen kept talking that same sneering tone. "This is my property line," and he was practically loitering. "If he's that frail, I'm not responsible." My hands were shaking as I held my son, trying to calm him, reassure him. But Karen just kept on. It stung like acid in my face. Loitering. He was resting on the sidewalk, just trying to catch his breath. Sometimes, with his condition, he needs a second to regroup before continuing. But Karen, well, she decided that was an opportunity to attack him. The ambulance eventually arrived, and the paramedics were quick to assess the situation. But as they worked, Karen stood off to the side, arms still folded, muttering, "All this for a minor fall. Maybe if he learned to walk right, this wouldn't be such a big deal." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. It took everything I had not to lose my composure. Only the gentle hand of a neighbor on my shoulder kept me from doing something I'd regret. My son was loaded onto the stretcher, and I couldn't stop the guilt from gnawing at me. The guilt that I wasn't out there, that I hadn't been the one to stop this before it happened. My wife arrived just as the doors to the ambulance were closing. I reassured her that I'd go with him to the hospital. We'd figure this out together. And there she was again. Karen, yelling from the driveway. He was on my lawn. "Don't even think about suing me for your negligence." I refused to dignify it with a response. The ambulance pulled away, Leah VYing her standing there, still as smug as ever. At the hospital, everything moved so fast. The paramedics asked questions: my son's name, his medical history. I explained about his disability, how his legs had always been weak, how he accepted that braces might be a part of his life for years. But that didn't make this any easier. The doctors told me that his tibia was broken in 2 places. He'd need surgery if the alignment wasn't perfect. I didn't know what to feel. Heartbroken? Furious? Guilty? As we waited for news, we texted some of the neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation. They were already offering statements to the police. One neighbor had already contacted them about a possible assault. Another mentioned how Karen had a reputation for being hostile toward anyone she deemed imperfect, especially people with disabilities. It made my blood boil. This wasn't just an accident. She targeted my son, and she'd done it before. The next day, we gathered evidence, witness statements, photos, even a recording from a neighbor's doorbell camera that showed Karen's aggressive behavior. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get the ball rolling. The attorney I contacted explained that we could pursue both civil and criminal action. He told us to gather as much evidence as possible. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The HOA sent me a violation notice for public disturbance and unapproved modifications the bench we'd placed by the sidewalk so our son could rest when needed. This, I knew, was her petty revenge, but it only solidified our resolve to fight back. We were going to make sure she faced the consequences. A special HOA meeting was scheduled, and we decided to attend. My son would stay home, away from the drama, but my wife and I were going. The entire neighborhood was talking about Karen's behavior. People were finally standing up against her reign of terror. At the meeting, Karen sat there, all prim and proper in her immaculate blazer, but her arrogance was palpable. She still thought she was untouchable. But when the accusations started rolling in verbal harassment, misuse of power, and the most alarming one physical assault on a child, she couldn't hide her discomfort. The room was tense. I stood up, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. I'm the father of the boy she injured. He's 9 years old, and he has a disability that affects his mobility. 2 days ago, I found him lying on the ground, screaming in pain, his leg broken after Karen either pushed or pulled him. The murmurs in the room were immediate. People were shocked. But Karen? She stood up, shrieking. He was trespassing. He was on my property. She slammed her hand on the table, but the crowd wasn't having it. The witnesses started speaking up. One neighbor recounted how Karen had grabbed my son's crutch and yanked him down. Another told how she'd left threatening notes about mobility aids. Each story chipped away at her composure. The final blow came when my wife showed the photos of our son's cast, his medical records. The board couldn't ignore it. They voted to suspend Karen pending an investigation. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal battles and doctors' visits. My son's leg was healing, but the emotional scars were taking longer to heal. His nightmares about Karen's face haunted him, but we kept pushing forward. We knew we couldn't let this go. The day of the trial came, and we were ready. My son stayed with a family friend, away from the tension. Karen walked into the courtroom with her lawyer, trying to project some sense of power, but I could see through it. She had no more control over us. The prosecutor laid out everything: the witness statements, the video footage, the medical records. Karen took the stand, claiming she only nudged my son away from her flowers. But the evidence was too strong. The video showed her yanking my son's crutch, the child's scream of pain, the force that was more than a simple nudge. The judge didn't buy her excuses. The verdict was clear: guilty of assault and reckless endangerment of a disabled child. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it didn't take away the pain of what had happened. Karen was fined and sentenced to community service, but nothing would undo the damage she caused. As I left the courthouse, I thought about how she had underestimated me. She thought she could bully my family and get away with it. But we fought back. We won. In the months that followed, Karen sold her house and left the neighborhood. The new HOA president, a kind woman named Beatrice, introduced more inclusive guidelines. The community, once again, felt like a place where we could belong. And my son? He kept walking, one step at a time, gaining strength and confidence. He had a long road ahead, but every day was of victory. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones that teach us the most. This was one of those times.